Hi there! If you're looking to up your game in macro photography and do something a little bit more creative, something you could try is to do wide angle macro and close up. And today I'm out doing some of that. I'm in this disused quarry, so apologies if there's a bit of an echo because there's rocks all around me in this sort of bowl that I'm stood within. But I am using my Laowa 15mm wide angle macro lens just here. And I've also got on my twin macro flash. Now, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about that lens later, but to start with, let's find some flower shots just so I can talk you through the process of my thinking when I'm setting up a wide angle macro shot. Okay, so I've got this flower and I've got some background of the rocks inside this quarry. And what I'm going to do is first off frame up my shot so I can get the background looking as I want it to with that flower in it. So I'm just placing the flower in the sort of bottom right hand corner, and I've got the cliff of the rocks just slanting up behind it. So next thing that I'm going to do is expose for the background. So I want to make sure that that beautiful blue sky we've got is not overexposed. So let's just set the shutter speed a bit higher. Yeah, that's looking good. So now the flower's quite dark because one, I'm down here inside the quarry where it's a little bit darker than it is up there. But two, I am blocking out some of the sunlight with my camera. So I'm going to use the flash just to fill in that light on the subject. So let's position things. I'll use my focusing light just to help me to manually focus. Then I'm going to put the two flashes coming in from that direction to replicate the sunlight. So now I've got things where I want them. Let's just manually focus. And we're about there. And that's the shot. So I'm going to take another one now, looking down over one of these flowers to get the reflection of the quarry in this pond just here. So let's take a look at those two shots now. Right, I've got a little snail just here, and instinctively, as soon as I've put my camera down, he's retreated into his shell. So what I need to do is just sit here and wait for maybe a couple of minutes, and he'll eventually come out and I can get a photograph of him. So if you're ever photographing snails, just place your camera near them and they'll disappear into the shell, but then they'll come out, and when they realise it's not something that's going to attack them, they'll carry on. When you're focusing at this closer range though, you do need to be a bit careful that it doesn't get interested and start climbing up your lens, because the last thing you need is snail slime along your front element. So I'm just going to wait it out, see what happens, see if I can get a shot of him. So why would you want to do wide angle macro photography? Well, our standard macro lenses tend to be round about 100mm, 90mm, 100, 110. They're the really popular ones right now, but they have such a narrow angle of view that you don't get much in the background at all. And doing wide angle macro and close-up photography allows you to show off your subject's environment more. Now, I've talked about this quite a lot recently in other videos. So for example, my birds in flight video talked about the importance of showing off some of the background and the bird's environment. And it's exactly the same here with insects and flowers and other small things. You know, there's only so many times you can photograph an insect on a flower head at 100mm before you start to get bored of it. And this gives your viewer something much more interesting to see that relates to your subject. And here we've got some really interesting backgrounds that I can use. This is specifically the reason that I chose to come to this disused quarry today. Over here we've got these disused rail carts. Now they're really interesting because they look like something that could have come out of one of those old American railroad movies. God knows how long they've been sat here, but they look really interesting. We've got these cliffs behind me, they're interesting. We've got some mixtures of colours, we've got greys and pinks and things like that. So it's not just going to be an insect on a flower with a green background or a dark background. There's going to be a lot more interesting in the background. And not many people really do this wide angle macro photography. And I've been speaking all year really about different being better than better. So if you want to up your game, you can photograph something that's a little bit different to what many other people do. And that's why you might want to consider wide angle macro. So let's talk about this wide angle macro lens from Laowa. Now it's 15mm and that means you get 110 degrees field of view, so that's massively wide. No, just to correct myself, it's not the field of view, it's 110 degrees angle of view. And so you can capture an awful lot of the background in the picture, but the magic of it is that it lets you focus really close up, as any macro lens would. It gets you to one-to-one magnification. Now that happens at 12.2 centimeters, but when they quote the minimum focusing distance on any lens, that distance of 12.2 centimeters is the distance from the flange, so the point where the mount meets the camera body. And so it's only a couple of centimeters from the front of the lens. Another quick correction, it's not measured from the flange, it's measured from the sensor. So you really do need to get very close to your subject if you want to get them at one-to-one. So quite a few photos that I've taken today, and ever since I've had this lens, don't tend to be at one-to-one magnification. So technically not macro, they're close-up photos. And I tend to find that using a ratio of 0.4 to 1 is often best with some of the larger insects. So things like butterflies and moths and things like that. But if you're going to go for a much smaller one, I have taken some shots today of ants, things like that, much smaller than a big butterfly, for example. You need to be getting in really, really close to them. So it can be tricky because many insects will fly off the minute you get anywhere near that kind of range. And another thing that makes it difficult is because you've got to think about the background so much more. So in normal circumstances, you see a subject, an insect somewhere, or an ice flower you want to photograph, or whatever it is, and you approach it, you find an angle, you photograph it, and you don't need to think too much about the background. As long as there's decent separation to it, it's okay. But in this circumstance, actually, that is more important because that takes up so much of the frame. So if I were here, for example, and the subject is where I am, I probably wouldn't take this photo because I'm not going to get anything interesting in the background. It's just going to be that wall of rock. So you really do need to think about it, and it does stop you from taking some of the photos because you're not going to get an interesting background. Now, it's an f4 lens, so that's the minimum aperture that you can go for. Oh, I don't know what was wrong with me when I was recording that part. It's the maximum aperture, not the minimum aperture. So just to be clear, the aperture range is from f4 to f32. And that might sound a little bit high, you know, many macro lenses are f2.8, something like that. But the reality is with macro, it's very rare that you're shooting down at f2.8. And particularly with a lens that you have to focus so closely with, you're not going to be at f2.8 because it'd be such a thin slice of the subject that's in focus. So f4 is plenty. To be honest, I tend to be shooting at f11 or f16. And with regard to the aperture, it's not electronic, so you can't control it through your camera, but it's all controlled with this dial, this ring, so that allows you to choose your aperture. And it's a smooth turning ring, so some manual lenses are clickable, so you click to the next aperture and you can really feel when it goes into that aperture or not. You're definitely in f8 or f9 or f11 or whatever it is. With this one, it isn't, it's smooth, and I quite like that because you don't have to be at a specific aperture. There are times, particularly with macro, where I flick between apertures and think, oh, one's a little bit too soft and one's a little bit too solid, and I want somewhere between the two. And this allows you to choose absolutely anything. So you're not specifically in one aperture, you could be somewhere between two. And that allows you to take complete control of what you want your picture to look like, particularly with the out of focus areas. So that's a really nice touch. Now the lens does come with a lens hood that I've put on it, but I've not been using the lens hood all day, and I never use the lens hood on this lens because it gets in the way. So very often when you're focusing in that close, this lens hood is pushing the flower or whatever it is that your subject's on out of the way. So I always take the lens hood off, and I think the manufacturers know this, that it's a useless lens hood. The reason that they've put it in probably is because people would complain if they bought a lens that didn't have a lens hood. But it's so wide, you can see here it flowers out like that, and because the lens is a really wide lens, the lens hood needs to be like that, otherwise you would get bits of the lens hood in the picture. So don't worry too much about not using the lens hood. You just need to be a bit aware of things like flare, because if you're shooting towards the sun or shooting towards your flash, if you've got your flash tube near to it, you could get a bit of flaring in there. But to be honest, it hasn't bothered me that much. I've got the occasional shot here and there where I've not really thought about the flash enough and I've got a little bit of flare in it, but nothing to worry about. So overall, I really like this lens. It's not for everyone. If you are a beginner macro photographer, get a standard focal length macro lens, so something 90, 100, 110 millimeters. Don't go for this straight away. But if you're a more experienced macro photographer who's looking for something else to really up your game, this could be for you. Now, another thing that makes the backgrounds with this lens so special are its aperture blades. So this lens has 14 aperture blades. Normally, a fairly entry-level cheap lens will probably have 5. Your standard mid-range lenses will have 7, and your high-end pro lenses will have 9+. This has got 14. I don't think I've ever owned a lens that's got 14 aperture blades. And the reason 14 aperture blades makes such a difference is because it approximates a circle a lot more. So when you've got 5, then really it's not quite circular, it's more like a pentagon, and 7 heptagon, 9 nonagon, and so on. With 14, I don't know what shape has 14 sides, so I can't tell you that, but with 14 it's a much closer approximation to a circle. So this has got really high specifications, and it's a cheap price. So the recommended retail price for this lens is £499, but it's been on offer a few times this year for £429. So it's worth keeping your eye out to see if this lens drops down in price at any point. But even at 500 quid, this is a really good value lens. So have a think about that, it might be something you want. This video isn't sponsored by Laowa in any way. They don't even know I'm putting it out. I'm doing this just because I want to show you the capabilities of this lens and how interesting wide-angle macro photography can be. And this lens is available in Canon, Nikon, Sony A and E mounts, Pentax K mount, and Leica L Mount. I don't think I've missed any of them there, but if I have, I'll put them up on the screen. So there's a lot of different camera brands that you could use with this lens. one other thing that this lens is famous for is its ability to shift. It's got a shift function, and not many lenses have that other than tilt shift lenses. And the purpose for it is because wide angle lenses in particular often mean that lines curve a little as they go out. You might have noticed when you're taking wide angle shots in woods and things like that, the trees can start to bend out towards the top. And because you've got a lot of the background in there, they wanted to give you this ability to be able to straighten that background out. So it's got this little lever at the side, and when you push it you can move the lens, and it moves up and down on this little slider here. Now, I've never used this function because I'm always out in the natural environment, so it doesn't particularly matter if things curve a little bit. If you think about the rocks that I've been using as background today, they're wavy lines anyway, so nobody looking at them would know that there's a curvature to it. But if I was photographing macro in, say, an urban environment, like a city centre or something like that, with lots of tall, straight buildings in the background, then this would make a difference. Likewise, if I was doing macro in a woodland that had got lots of straight trees, so for example, a birch wood, then this might make a difference. But as it stands, I've never used that function, so I can't tell you if it's any good or not. But it is something that might be a benefit to you if you do photography in urban environments. So maybe you do architecture as well as macro. This could be useful. Now, whenever I put a macro video out, I always get a lot of questions about this macro flash. So I've made a video entirely about this and why I think it's the best macro flash in the world and why it's become so important to me in the way that I do macro. So that might have already come out, or it might be coming out in a couple of videos time. I'm not sure which order I'm going to put things out, but there will be a video on why this is so useful. Now, do you need this lens to take the kind of shots that I've been taking today? Well, not necessarily. There are wide angle lenses out there that let you focus close up, but not necessarily at 1:1 magnification. So if you want to focus at 1:1 and get true macro, then I think this is the only lens on the market that allows you to do both wide and 1:1 magnification. But check your lenses, you may have one that allows you to do fairly close up, and that'll allow you to try this before you go and invest in the lens. So see if that's an option for you. Now, if you're interested in more creative ways to take macro photos, why not take a look at this video? Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.